So we are here with a review of the final two episodes of Showtime's Kidding before the big season finale, Philliam and Lieutenant Pickles. And I wanted to look at these two episodes together because even though I know they obviously existed as separate episodes, I felt they really complemented each other very well. And I want to flow into them because even though they complement each other, I also found them to be very Jekyll and Hyde in their quality. Now, let me start off by saying that I think this season of Showtime's Kidding has just been amazing on so many levels, and I'm hoping it gets remembered around award season time. That's why I was so excited when I heard that it was renewed for a second season, because my hope is during the off season on demand and other areas, people are going to start catching on it, because it's just a beautiful, a dreamy, imaginary series, but one that also can just really kick you back into reality really hard. And I think we saw a lot of that in Philliam and Lieutenant Pickles. So I want to address some of my key takeaways. Let me start off by Philliam, because I just got to ask the question, why Daryl? He's the only African-American cast, or I should say crew member, on Mr. Pickles' show, and it just seemed like the whole deal about his origin and built up and giving him the father who was the serial killer, and it seemed uncomfortable because it seemed like, okay, well, we have to give the one black person on the set a backstory, and then we give him a backstory involving a father on death row and all of these things. It seemed odd, it seemed weird, and it really seemed to be kind of like a bit of a forced white savior type narrative being put into play. Again, I thought it was odd, and then there were certain comedic aspects they wanted to do around the execution involving, the victims were redheads. I don't know, I felt really odd and uncomfortable about it. Some other takeaways going beyond that. Phil and Will, we get a much better picture of what the dynamic is with Phil and Will regarding Jeff. Phil and Will are essentially Jeff and Mr. Pickles. Jeff had always had some issue and some aversion to Phil because Phil was just this pure, unadulterated anger like Jeff is, where Jeff's Mr. Pickles persona sees that more in Will, and Jeff almost wanting Will to be more like that. There's just such an interesting dynamic in play there. For so long was struggling with the Mr. Pickles persona, he sees that battle taking place between his two sons. And of course, when we see the flashbacks with Seb, we just see how involved and controlling Seb has been throughout this entire process. Daryl's dad, Joey, the Pickle Barrel Falls artwork, I thought that was just beautiful. It's just pure Michel Gondry yet again. Not saying specifically it was him, but it's just that tone and that vibe, and I think that artistic creativity he brings when he does projects like these. Lieutenant Pickles' video game, I thought that was fascinating. It's, Seb wants to control Mr. Pickles and doesn't want anybody else to control Mr. Pickles, but again, it's just this idea of Jeff having control, and it was interesting how much the video game, I think, in a lot of ways represents, that angry Jeff that Pickles keeps trying to push down and push down and push down. Jeff blurring and the merging of the two worlds, the phone calls, which I think are fascinating, because I think there's two schools of thought here. There's the obvious one that Jeff's having a breakdown, and those voices are essentially things that he is imagining. Then there's also Seb. You can't take Seb out of consideration in this regard because he's a control freak and he's willing to do what he feels is necessary for the betterment of his family, even if it means, playing the puppet master in the process. And do I think he's above having some of the voice actors call Jeff to kind of keep him in control and keep him in line? No, I don't. I wouldn't be surprised if we actually found that out in the season finale. So I think that's very interesting, the way it's keeping us questioning going in this. It's, in some regards, you can see that Jeff is really going through a breakdown. But then you can also see the argument that maybe it's just the uncomfortableness that comes with somebody who's starting to better understand himself more. The Deidre Pickleson Scott situation I thought was just as toxic as it was going to be. Deidre and Scott just can't control their own family dynamic. They're now bringing other people into it. And Pickleson, it was, the fact that Deidre has the affair with Pickleson and this idea that they can no longer communicate through their puppetry, it was brutal, it was honest, and it was heartbreaking. And again, it was one of those things that stuck with you, as you went along. And again, I can't help but touch upon Sarah Lipinski, no longer Sarah Lipinski, even with her Sarakeet, and that really shocking ending. First off, props to Sarah Lipinski and how she's just been playing a really twisted version of herself. But I did not see that throat-cutting ending coming by any stretch of the imagination, and that was just a hell of a way for us to go into the season finale. A season finale that's going to bring Jeff most likely giving a speech live on television, national tree, the holiday time. What could go wrong? I know I can't wait. Very excited where the season's taking us. Can't see where it's going to end up landing.